Despite numerous intervention programs or schemes initiated by the Nigerian government in the housing sector, housing prices and rent remains high, making Nigeria among the most expensive housing markets in Africa with a very active rental market. So how do you slay the three-headed dragon? Well, Omotola Abimbola, investment analyst with Chapel Hill Denham, joins us further to discuss. Good morning to you, Tola. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with food. All-time high. Is this strictly a structural problem with rising food prices, Tola?
Thank you very much, Rotos. It's my pleasure to be here. Speaking about Nigeria's food inflation problem, to a very large extent, I would agree with you that structural factors are the major causal factors for the recent pickup in food inflation. But I think one very important thing to note is that it is not just a Nigerian phenomenon, because if you look at what is happening globally, I mean, all across the world at the moment, we've actually seen a strong uptick in food deflation. If you look around our neighboring countries, such as Ghana, for instance, food inflation in Ghana was at single digits before we had the COVID-19 crisis. In late Q1 2020, but later on it went as high as 14%, and now it's still above 12%. If you look at the francophone West African region as well, we have seen inflation rates actually jump up. And if you look outside of West Africa, and if you even look at the larger emerging markets, such as Brazil, such as Russia, we have seen a very strong pickup in food deflation. So there is actually a global phenomenon of rising food prices that we are facing as a world today. And that's been driven by some supply chain challenges that occurred after the outbreak of COVID-19. Farmers, to a very large extent, couldn't access their farms. Supply chain, global trade, etc. were disrupted, and that affected food prices. And secondly, we also had, an issue with a strong pickup, in demand, particularly coming out of Asian countries, such as China. So if you look at food prices as a basket globally today, based on the FAO Global Food Index, food prices are up by 22% year on year globally, and it's at the highest level that we have seen since at least 2014. Speaking about the index now. So generally, there is a global concern about food inflation, but we also have some local factors at play here in Nigeria as well. And I can mention three major ones. In 2019, in the third quarter, we had the federal government, and security agencies actually move to close Nigeria's key border crossings against trade due to concerns about dumping. We also had a very sharp depreciation of the exchange rate last year that also affected imported food inflation. And generally, I think one key thing that also affected, local food prices last year was the outbreak of COVID-19, which disrupted the planting season. So over in fact season last year, between late Q1 and early Q2, migrant labor wasn't able to access Nigeria to support farmers, in planting. Several farmers as well couldn't access their, farms due to restrictions on movement. And we paid the price during the harvest season with an underwhelming harvest season. So generally, it's a global phenomenon with the recent uptick in food prices. But we also have a number of structural and supply side challenges facing us locally here in Nigeria as well.
Thank you so much for that, Tola. I want to move to transportation. What do you make of the 78% year-on-year rise in bus fares in Nigeria?
That's due to a number of factors. We have seen the prices of fuel actually jump up in Nigeria. PMS, which is the more popular fuel used by transport operators, is up by roughly around 12% year on year. So today, fuel price per liter, PMS price per liter is around 166 naira. A year ago, it was around 145, and that move was principally due to adjustments taken by the federal government in order to reduce the cost of the burden of subsidy facing fiscal accounts. And even beyond that, I think we can also, to a large extent, also blame COVID-19 as a factor causing the rise in transport fares. After the outbreak of COVID, we had a number of social distancing measures that were imposed, by the government to curb the spread of the virus, and that limited the number of people that could be, in a single bus or in a single car, and of course the per unit price of transport has to go up. And as you all know, in Nigeria, prices are very sticky downwards. So once they moved up, even when the restrictions were relaxed, it became very difficult for them to come down again. So it's due to a multitude of factors, but I think key among them would be that the outbreak of COVID-19 and of course the adjustment done to fuel prices.
Thank you for that, Tol. I've got about a few minutes to go. I want to ask you quickly about housing, rising rents, cost of housing prices. How are you taking that in with respect to with the trajectory this year?
I mean, like you also mentioned, that's also been on the uptrend. Food, transport, and housing. There's a problem of housing shortfall facing the country as a whole. We have seen different estimates, although some are less believable than others. But the more popular estimate is that we have a housing gap of about 16 million currently facing the country. And perhaps I could mention that housing gap is even a lot more prevalent in urban areas. That also brought the brunt of the COVID-19 health pandemic that affected supplies, and that also led to an increase in demand as we saw more people actually staying at home to work. So it's both a problem coming from supply and demand.
And Tola, if we take everything together, the full three-headed dragon, food, transport, housing, how do Nigerians cope? And how much longer do we have to deal with this? Is it a short-term thing or is it long-term? How do you see things playing out?
Yeah, definitely it's a big problem for Nigerian households. We are seeing, real income headed downward. For the fourth consecutive year, we have seen real GDP per capita, actually declining. And declining very steeply as that last year because of the growth shock that we had. So for the average consumer, you're seeing, his or her wallet, actually decline on an inflation-adjusted basis, and then also having to cope with very, elevated inflationary pressures. But speaking to the outlook, I think it would get worse before it gets better. I mean, regarding food prices, I think because of lesser restrictions that we have this time around, in 2021, we should see a much more stronger planting season than we had last year. So that should probably account for some drop, in food inflation later on in the year. We also have the base effect that will be favorable towards the end of the year. But in the short term, I think it's going to remain very elevated, partly because we expect to see, an increase in fuel prices taking place in Nigeria. But speaking to the much more longer term outlook for inflation in general and also food prices, I think one thing we have to notice is that inflation rate in Nigeria is to a very large extent elevated historically. On the average, Nigeria's headline inflation has averaged 4% over the last 20 years. So low single-digit inflation is actually alien to Nigeria. And that's due to a multitude of structural factors facing the country. And I think for policymakers, the challenge before them at the moment will be to find ways to solve some of these age-long structural challenges that have kept inflation rate elevated in Nigeria historically. And that's going to involve, making sure that we rely less on rain-fed agriculture and move to irrigation, based agriculture so that we can farm all year round and reduce the level of food prices operating the country. Also, infrastructure stock as well, also has to go up.
Great stuff. Tola, run out of time. I have to have you back. Omotola Abimbola, investment analyst with Chapel Hill Denham. Thank you so much for your insights on the rising cost of living in Nigeria.